Hello everybody and welcome back to the show. In this video we're going to continue on the diorama which I've already started, and we're going to paint and damage and weather the Jagdpanther, which is sort of the main piece of this diorama. So let's get cracking with that. I want it to look like the Jagdpanther has been damaged in combat, that it has been hit several times over with shells, and also that it's taken a direct hit to the rear where the petrol tank are, so there's been a fire. That results in all the rubber on the tires having burnt and is therefore gone. I use some pliers and a scalpel to remove all the excess plastic. To get a nice smooth finish, I sand it down with a file and sandpaper. The immense heat from the fire has caused part of the running gear to be damaged, so I use some pliers and remove some pieces from the wheels. I also use pliers to make some correlating damage on the hull of the tank, where the direct hit took place. Once I'm satisfied with the result, I use a candle to remove the sharpest of the edges around the broken armor. The damage might not look super realistic, but it looks very good on this model, I think. It's been supposedly hit by several hits and it's caused a big crack. I use some super glue just to fill in some of the cracks and smooth everything out a little bit. I add some more wear and tear on the engine deck on the tank, amongst other things opening the cover of the engine. I also drill out some of the bolts holding together the protection screen from the engine fans. When I'm satisfied with the adjustments and damage I've done to my tank, it's time for paint. I use this sand yellow as a base and add in a little bit of brown and ochre yellow to the mix. So it's time to address the damaged parts. I use aluminum paint and gunmetal grey to fill in the gaps where the tank has taken damage. I've added several places where it's been hit by shells but ricocheted, but you can still see the impact of the shell that has been fired at the tank. Okay, so we move on to camouflage. I found several camouflage schemes online and I found one that looked very nice, which I decided to replicate. I'm using this brown color and a green color and start applying it in watered down and thin layers. Since I don't have an airbrush, I found this to be a very effective and nice way of doing it. Painting several thin layers takes a lot of time and requires patience, but the result is very striking and nice, and most importantly, you preserve the details in the model kit. The first layer with the green paint looks absolutely horrible, but once you get your paintbrush out again once it's dried and you apply the second layer, you can see already that the paint looks much better. The only thing to be aware of is that you have to stay between the lines you've already painted and that the paint isn't too thick so it leaves runny and ugly marks. The result is very good and I'm pleased with the final result of the camouflage paint. It doesn't look as good as if I had an airbrush to do it with, but I find this method of using several thin layers to be a very nice substitute method for an airbrush. Besides, it's much cheaper to do as well. I've also tried to make some variation in the damage the tank has had. On the front, none of the shells penetrated, but on the sides and rear, all of the shells penetrated and caused damage. That's why I decided to model it slightly differently. In most model kits you get several decals you can use, but usually you only use one of them. So I have a box filled with several decals that I've used for all sorts of kits, and here's one for Panzer IV that I didn't use. I'm just going to use some of these numbers, apply them on the tank, and I'm not too concerned with historical accuracy here, so I'm just going to use a random number and some iron crosses. Once the decals are done, it's time for weathering, and I'm going to use this enamel paints that I've used rust color. I'm going to apply this on all the highlighted and exposed areas of the tank. Starting with the running gear, just to get a bit of practice, I apply it on the bolt and the highlighted areas on the model. It's a fairly standard weathering job, and I just use the rust enamels in all the areas with cracks and crannies, especially between the armor welds and all the things where rust might collect. Some highlights and painting of the tools are necessary, and I do that as well. And now it's time for scratches. I use a little bit of a greenish paint on a sponge, and I just apply it randomly around the highlights and some surfaces that might have been scratched during the use of the tank. Whether there been some equipment been dragged along it, or something been dropped on top of it, or just regular wear and tear. When I'm done with the sponge, I use my pencil and add some more chipping and some more scratches. I just do this because it adds a little bit more of depth to the model. The next step is to add some dark brown or rust into the scratches that I've painted earlier. This adds another layer of weathering, and the effect is very nice and realistic. One of the final steps is to add the fire damage on the back of the tank, as I mentioned earlier. I'm using some products from AK and a lot of black and brown wash. So I start with the black wash, which I just mixed, and I apply it to the bottom of the tank to see if it has a consistency and viscosity that I'm happy with, and then I'm using a Q-tip to smear it out to see how easily it blends. This one I was quite pleased with, so I ended up using this wash. once I'm done with the black paint, I also add a thin layer of brown wash. Most of the brown wash was removed with the Q-tip and a towel, but it adds an extra layer of weathering, and that's always nice. I also add on some specks of white paint just to make the fire damage look a bit more realistic. I might have taken it a bit far and this might be overkill, but all in all I think it gives a nice contrast and it adds more details to the model. And as a final finish, I added some rust wash on top of all the other layers. Most of this wash was also removed with a paper towel. I did this as I wanted to look as the tank has been damaged and taken out of action for a while and been out in the rain. So the rust is somewhat prevalent in this picture, but it's going to be mostly removed when we're done with it. And that's just about done with this model. So, are you ready to see how it looks? So that's my rendition of a wrecked Jagdpanther. I hope you enjoyed this build. I really liked it. I'm very pleased with the camouflage and the weathering and the damage. Everything really, I think it came together rather nicely. If you think so too, you may feel free to like, comment and subscribe to this video. It means a lot to me. Please feel free to do that. And hopefully I'll see you in another video. Thank you very much for watching and good night.